Hello my beautiful friends, my name is Alexandria and welcome back to my channel. So today I am going to be sitting down to talk about my top 10 favorite books that I read in the year of 2021. I cannot believe that this year has gone by so quickly. I think we all feel this way. And especially on the latter half of this year, I was in a good reading slump for a while, but I do have quite a few books that I added to this list. It was hard for me to narrow it down because I gave a lot of books 5 stars, but I wanted to make sure that I added books that really had a large impact on me overall as a human being this year, and things that I would recommend to other people, and books that I want to have on my bookshelves. And so yeah, that's kind of how I went about choosing the books for this list. But without further ado, let's just go ahead and get into my top 10 favorite books of 2021. So before I jump into my list of books, I wanted to give a quick shout out to the brand that I am collaborating with for this video. I was absolutely overjoyed when Ana Luisa reached out to me because I have seen them in so many of my favorite booktubers videos and like non-booktubers videos as well for years now, and I have just admired them as a company. They have some absolutely amazing unique pieces, from rings, necklaces, earrings, bracelets, pretty much anything you could ask for. And what I love about them so much for me is that it's super important that the companies that I affiliate myself with also align with my ethical and moral values, and that's what Ana Luisa does really well. They are doing really great work when it comes to reducing their carbon footprint or making sure that the jewelry items they create do not have a carbon footprint at all. And that's something that is incredible to be doing now in this day and age, and something that I think is really important. As I have been getting older, I am just curating and figuring out what jewelry styles I like, and Ana Luisa is a brand that has a wide range of items that I think will fit any style and really goes along with any mood that I'm feeling at any given time, which is wonderful for me. I'm actually wearing 2 of their pieces right now. I will have close-ups of the 3 items that they sent over to me. This is a necklace that says naamah. If you don't know, I am pregnant again with my 2nd child, and so this was something that had a lot of sentimental value for me, and why I feel like I'm about to cry. I'm not really the type of person who likes wearing like name necklaces and stuff like that. I've never really been like that, but this is something that I will just wear very, very proudly throughout the rest of my life. And these earrings are something that I really love as well because they really reminded me of Howl's earrings in Howl's Moving Castle. If you have not seen that Studio Ghibli film, you should probably check it out. I read the book sometime this year as well, and that's really good too. But that was kind of my inspiration for getting these earrings and why they sparked my attention, and I just really love green. And then the other items I will show in another clip, but those just reminded me of my daughter because her name is very celestial. And when we decided on her name, I kind of just naturally started gravitating towards things that were very like space oriented and stuff like that. It's really important for me to be able to put meaning back into the things that I'm wearing, especially when it's something like jewelry. I am very picky about the jewelry pieces that I'm wearing, and so yeah, they have to represent me as a person or the things that I value or all of these above, and Ana Luisa really does a wonderful job with doing that. I definitely recommend checking them out if you haven't already. I know it is past Christmas time, but we can always do a late Christmas present for either yourself or someone else in your life that you think would enjoy these items. And something awesome is that they are currently running their biggest sale of the year, so you can end the year on a high note. They are offering 10% off and last chance items with up to 60% off. So I know you guys will love them if you check them out. And so yeah, I just wanted to share that with you all. I will have all the links and details to these specific items and where you can purchase down below. It is a link that is affiliated with me, so just keep that in mind. But yes, all of that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get into my top 10 favorite books of 2021. So I'm gonna go ahead and start with the physical books that I have with me. I am definitely going to be purchasing these books. If you don't know anything about me, other than the last couple of months, normally when I buy books, I like to be extremely mindful of what I'm purchasing and only have books on my bookshelf that are really impactful and really bring me joy and things that I am going to want to share with my children in the future and anybody else that I love in my life. So just keeping that in mind, I have 3 of these books. These other books will probably be added to my bookshelves sometime in the near future. So the first book that I have here is none other than the autobiography of Malcolm X, as told by Alice Haley. I actually listened to this one on audiobook, which I have reiterated time and time again because it was absolutely amazing. It was narrated by Lawrence Fishburne, and I am so picky when it comes to my audiobook narrators. Lawrence Fishburne absolutely killed it. He kept my attention. He kept me engrossed in an autobiography. It also helps that Malcolm X's life was incredible and something amazing to hear about and read about, and so it's definitely going to be a book that I revisit in the future, whether it's an audiobook or I read the physical copy. Can we just like look at my man, like I said, all of these books did have an impact on me in some way, shape, and form, and this just really gave me some insight that I needed into myself and into the world that I wasn't aware of at the time. For me, it was a really important kind of turning point in my life to just open my eyes up to a lot of different things that I was not aware of before, and also giving me language to define and articulate things that I wasn't able to articulate previously. Yeah, I really just fell in love with him. That's all it comes down to be perfectly honest. So the next 2 books that I have here are by an author that I fell in love with this year, Octavia E. Butler. I cannot tell you the impact that reading these books had on my life. So the first book that the first book that I actually read by Octavia E. Butler was Kindred. This is following our main character, Dana, who ends up going back in time. It's not something that she could control. It's something that just happens randomly, but she goes back in time to the antebellum South, and it basically happens whenever this little white boy is in trouble. And that's pretty much all that I'm going to say, because everything else is just very surprising. It can be very jarring. It can be very dark. It can be very hard to read, but I think that it is an important read as well. I love science fiction. It is one of my favorite genres, and I feel like over this last year I've really fallen in love with science fiction again. Kindred, I feel like, does a wonderful job at balancing science fiction with real world issues that go on in life, and that's what I really love about science fiction in general, because I do really love fantasy. I love suspending my disbelief and using my imagination in that way. But the thing about science fiction, and the thing about this style of science fiction, is that if it is meant to be a story that is kind of unsettling, if it's a type of science fiction that's asking more from you, then there needs to be a balance between the scientific aspects of it and the reality aspects of it. If you like more literary works and you want to get into science fiction, I feel like this would be a good option, but it's not too like word heavy or hard to comprehend in terms of the way that it's written. It's very easily digestible in the ways that it's written, not necessarily in the subject matters in this. So I definitely suggest looking up the trigger warnings in this as well. This does have depictions of slavery and all of the trauma and abuse and all of that goes along with it, but this was just a wonderful book, and I am definitely going to be rereading this in the future. I read this in literally like one day, so if that says anything. And then actually the book that I read to get kind of out of my reading slump and get back into reading again was The Parable of the Sower. This was one that I kind of had been putting off for a little while because I knew that I was going to enjoy it, and I enjoyed it just as much as I thought I was going to. There is a second book called Parable of the Talents that I have on my bookshelf. I have not read yet because I know that I'm gonna like it as well, and I don't want it to be over. Okay, I'm not gonna get too much into the plot. The reason why I enjoy this one so much specifically is because in dystopian novels, and this is something that I didn't really realize until I read this book, and what I realized is that I am not used to seeing myself in dystopian character. I grew up loving dystopian books. YA dystopian books were like my shit for a good amount of time. I still have a few of them that just hold a near and dear place to in my heart. But being able to see a Black main character in these types of stories is something that I hadn't really experienced before. And so this was a ride, this was a journey, and I thoroughly enjoyed every second of it. If you like science fiction, if you like dystopian novels, you have to read this. There's so many things of value in this book, whether it's talking about religion, whether it's talking about relationships in this kind of after the end of the world. There's so many things that resonate for the reality that we live in right now, which is also unsettling but also kind of gratifying in a way. And there is a foreword by N.K. Jemisin, who is another one of my favorite authors. The next book that I have is Ace by Angela Chin, and this is a nonfiction book that basically talks about asexuality and the kind of spectrum of sexuality in general, and the way that we experience sexuality and the way that we experience love and how we experience those things from an asexual lens. It gave me a lot of insight into myself and who I am as a person and how I show up in relationship in regards to the way that society has conditioned me to show up and think that I need to show up. I feel like asexuality is looked at as something that is like a negative thing and something that isn't widely understood. All of the facets and all of the range of feelings that you can have being a person that is asexual, and I just really enjoyed it. It gave me a lot of insight into some people in my life who identify as asexual, and it made me question whether I was asexual or not. And it's just one of those books that let me see more deeply into myself. When I see things on a micro level of being able to see myself more clearly, I'm able to better understand things on a macro scale of being able to understand the world and everyone else more clearly. The next book that I want to talk about is another book that I read in Black History Month this year, and it is I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou, and wow. This was one of those books that I was kind of embarrassed that I hadn't gotten to yet, because I feel like as a person of color, as a person who loves reading in general, as a person who appreciates beautiful writing, beautiful literary writing, I just felt a little bit guilty that I hadn't read anything by Maya Angelou yet. So the fact that I was able to read this year was absolutely wonderful, and it literally exceeded all of my expectations. It was so much more than I thought that it was going to be. This is the start of the autobiographies that Maya Angelou wrote about her life, and it was a lot. What I loved about it was that every sentence was absolutely beautiful and had an impactful meaning that you wouldn't have necessarily gotten on the first read. So I would have to reread sections. This is definitely going to be something that I come back to and I reread again, because it is just one of those books that like is going to keep unearthing things for you within yourself and allowing you to know more about the person in the book as well. Just this small glance at the life that was experienced in this part of the autobiography was just absolutely incredible. There were so many things that were really, really challenging, really triggering, and really tough to get through and read, but the way that it was told in a way that made it almost palatable. I don't want to say fully palatable because it was still very challenging for me to read, but definitely look up the trigger warnings as well, because I think that that is something to go in to very mindfully. I see why it is a classic. I see why it is so highly regarded, and I definitely agree with everyone who says that everyone needs to read it. So to move on to a little bit of a lighter note, we're going to talk about my fave. Probably know what I'm going to say. If you don't, where have you been? Of course, I'm talking about Red Rising by Pierce Brown. Pierce Brown just, he did that shit. I am currently very slowly working through the kind of next series, extension series, I guess, of the Red Rising trilogy, but I read this entire trilogy this year and it was just amazing. It blew my mind. It made me so excited to get back into science fiction. It was just one of those books that just brought me so much joy. And not only that, it also was weirdly impactful for me as well in ways that I wasn't expecting. Like when I think I read like 2 chapters and I cried. The way that he constructed this world and the characters and the relationships between them and the relationships that I had with them, I don't know what it is, but the way that this man writes just speaks to my soul. This is also kind of like a dystopian type of science fiction situation set on like Mars, and we have these kind of factions that have people separated by like color. So we're just gonna pretend that this video is not a complete mess. I had to take a break because my camera died and now it is obviously nighttime, so some time has passed. I'm gonna try to get this done in my 15-minute break for work, so fingers crossed. But I think that was my cue to stop rambling about Red Rising. All right, so the next book is actually a book that I haven't talked about at all on this channel. It is My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. Basically, it's following our main character on 2 different timelines. It's kind of her in 2000 something when kind of the Me Too movement is up and coming and people are coming out about their experience with sexual assault, following her in the past and her experience as a high schooler and being in I don't even really want to call it a relationship, but I guess that's what we'll call it for lack of a better term, with her English teacher, basically. This book was triggering and resonated with me on many levels, and so it took me a lot of time to process it. I already knew going into it that it was going to be a tough read for me. It wasn't as tough as I thought that it was going to be, and after I read it I really had to take a step back and think about why it wasn't as challenging for me, because a lot of the things in the story were not surprising and did not make me as uncomfortable as I think it made other people reading it. It's a very unsettling book. It's a book that's not going to make you comfortable. It's not glorifying this type of relationship whatsoever. It's very much shining a bright spotlight on the relationship of grooming when it comes to a minor and a full-fledged whole ass adult man. I also listened to this on audiobook, and the audiobook narrator was really amazing with the way that she conveyed the character's emotions. I'm not sure if this will be a book that I'll get for my library just because of the content because it is so triggering for me personally, but I do think that this is an important read, and if you are feeling up to it after looking at the trigger warnings and all that, then I think that you should definitely check it out because it was written beautifully. It was a beautiful story and a really important perspective, I think. All right, the next book that I want to talk about is something that I was so excited to read. This is Naamah by Sarah Blake. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars too. I think I gave all these 5 out of 5 stars, so I don't know why I'm saying that. But this book was so good. If you don't know anything about me, I did grow up in a very religious household, and so when I heard about this book, it just like ticked all of the boxes for me, and then once I actually read it, it did even more. So basically this is from the perspective of Noah's wife and kind of them going through the process of building the ark and then being on the ark. So many areas that I had never thought of just hearing the story of Noah's ark, like as a child and even as a teenager growing up. So many things that we don't think about, like reproduction of the animals on the boat, like the mental health of the people on the boat for an extended period of time, not knowing when they're going to be reaching land or whatever the case may be, just trusting that it'll happen eventually, and so much more. But this is from a sapphic lens, and this book just meant so much to me personally. I can't even put into words how much it meant to me. But I'm just very grateful that this book exists. I am really excited to reread it in the future and just like get so much more from it than I got the first time, because I feel like I was just so excited while I was reading it and just so overwhelmed by the overall atmosphere of the book and just everything that was going on that I just want to be able to reread it again and get any of the pieces that I might have missed and just have it in my collection. The book is The Deep by River Solomon. This was actually my second book by River Solomon. The first one that I read was Sorrowland. I did really enjoy Sorrowland. It really got me into River Solomon's writing style, but The Deep is what really hit home for me, and it's so interesting because it's like a novella, and I usually don't prefer novellas. It's just me and my personality. I like longer books most of the time, so I can get more into the characters and more into the story and just get all of the things out of it that I wanted. But I had that same experience even though it was such a short story. This is a story that is following the people that were thrown off of slave ships, and basically their children, their unborn children, end up turning into these sea creature type people, and kind of goes from there. So it sounds very abstract, it sounds very strained, it sounds fucking weird to be honest, but I love that. But it also felt somehow ancestral. It somehow felt like pieces fitting together that were missing. I enjoyed it so much. I bought the physical copy because I listened to the first one on audiobook. That was also an incredible audiobook. I didn't realize that a lot of these books I've read on audiobook, but it was so good. The song The Deep is wonderful as well, and I think that's a really important aspect of reading the book as well. So last but not least, the first historical fiction sapphic book that I read in my entire life, and it pretty much changed my life. Like I said, it is a historical fiction, romance, sapphic, wonderful. We talk about the stars, we talk about love, we talk about petticoats. There is a third act, kind of dramatic piece, but I feel like it was handled actually really well. I've always loved historical fiction, and so being able to read it from a sapphic perspective was just something that brought me a lot of joy. And that is it for the top 10 books that I absolutely loved in 2021. Like I said, I may add some honorable mentions down below if I read any more books before the year ends that really make me happy inside. But there were so many books that I read this year that were really amazing. So I hope you all enjoyed this video. Let me know any other videos you'd like to see down below in the new year. Also, thank you so much to Ana Luisa for working with me on this video. I absolutely love them and appreciate all of the items that I received from them. You should definitely check them out if you haven't already. I will have the link down below, and it is a wonderful time to check them out. End of this year, 10% off, and also 60% off of their last chance items as of right now. So check them out while you can. That is from December 21st to January 1st. So yeah, definitely check them out. I'm sure you will absolutely love them as much as I do. And I hope you're doing well. I hope you're staying safe. And I hope you're finding joy in whatever way it is that you can. I love you.